Crimson Desert is a story-driven action RPG from Pearl Abyss, the studio behind Black Desert MMO. This game's been on people's minds for a long time now, ever since that first reveal back in 2019. What's wild is that it didn't even start as this kind of game. Early on, it was meant to be another MMO, but over the years, it shifted hard into a single-player setup, still set in the Black Desert universe, just way more focused on story and hands-on combat. A lot of the hype comes from how big and busy this world looks. We've seen huge open areas, crazy draw distances, and a ton of systems layered on top of each other. Trailers have shown riding dragons, gliding across the world with stamina-based movement that feels very Breath of the Wild inspired, and fighting massive enemies, including giant dragon-like constructs and monsters you can actually climb during combat. It's clearly swinging for something big. I've had a couple of chances to play Crimson Desert at Gamescom in both 2024 and 2025, and yeah, it's impressive in motion. Combat feels solid, animations are smooth, and the scale is there. That said, those demos only covered small slices of the world. There wasn't much room to mess with side quests, NPCs, or deeper story stuff, so there's still a lot we just haven't seen yet. That's kind of where Crimson Desert sits right now. It looks ambitious, it feels expensive, and it still has plenty of mystery around it. If it hits its current release date of March 19 this year and doesn't slip again, we won't have to wait much longer to see how much of this vision actually comes together. Gothic 1 Remake is one of those projects that has a lot of people excited and nervous at the same time. The original Gothic is a classic, and a big part of why people still talk about it is how its combat worked. It was slow, awkward, and honestly kind of rough at first, but once it clicked, it turned into this tense back and forth where timing, positioning, and reading enemies really mattered. The remake is where things get spicy. The developers are reworking the combat to be more fluid and modern, and that's the main source of concern. People who've played the demo say enemy AI feels too passive, and that fights don't push back hard enough. There's also talk that the parry system is too simple now, which could flatten what used to be a pretty demanding combat loop. For longtime fans, that's a big deal. On the flip side, the devs are promising a much richer world overall. Areas that were empty before are being filled out with new dungeons, more lore, and better reactivity to player actions. The goal seems to be keeping the soul of Gothic while making the world feel more alive and less rough around the edges. The interest is clearly there. The game already has over 1 million wishlists on Steam, which is wild for a remake of a cult classic. If the team can balance modern design without sanding off what made Gothic special, this could end up being one of the more interesting releases heading into 2026. Lords of the Fallen 2 was officially revealed at Gamescom 2025, and it's aiming for a 2026 release. The 2023 Lords of the Fallen landed pretty well overall, and stood out as one of the stronger Souls-likes in recent years, even if the combat had a few rough edges that held it back a bit. CI Games seems very aware of that. With the sequel, they're taking what worked, fixing what didn't, and pushing everything further. This one is set 100 years after the first game and continues from one of its endings, so it's not a soft reset, it's a straight follow-up. You can expect more weapons, more spells, and a wider mix of enemies, all built around a heavier, bloodier, and more aggressive feel. The goal isn't just more of the same, they're expanding systems across the board, from the Umbriel mechanic to world lore and the range of starting classes you can pick from. We actually talked with David Vagliolo, CI Games creative portfolio strategist at Gamescom last year, and based on that conversation, the team sounds very focused on refinement and scale. They want this sequel to feel bigger and more confident without losing what made the first game click. There's still no exact release date locked in, but everything points to Lords of the Fallen 2 being a serious step up when it lands sometime in 2026. Phantom Blade Zero is an upcoming action RPG from S-Game, set to release on September 9th, 2026 for PC and PlayStation 5. This is the studio's first game on those platforms, and it's been one people haven't stopped talking about since its first showing back in 2024. When it was revealed, a lot of folks straight up didn't believe what they were seeing. The footage looked so clean and so sharp that people assumed it had to be pre-rendered. It wasn't. Once you actually see it in motion, it clicks fast. At a glance, it might look like another fast Souls-style game, but that idea doesn't really hold up once you play it. The combat feels way closer to character action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. Even that comparison feels a little limiting, honestly. It has its own thing going on. We've played it multiple times, including at Gamescom, and every build has felt better than the last. One big reason the game took longer to finish is that the team didn't expect this level of interest. What started as a smaller project with 4 weapon types has grown into something much bigger. The final game is planned to have up to 22 different weapons, each with their own moves and animations. Yes, there are shortcuts in levels and a stamina-like system, but Phantom Blade Zero is not a Souls-like. It's a flashy Chinese martial arts action RPG that's fun whether you're a hardcore player or not. Every time I've touched it, it's been a blast, and September 9th can't get here fast enough. Mortal Shell 2 is the follow-up to Cold Symmetry's Dark Souls-like, and yeah, this one caught a lot of people off guard. The first Mortal Shell had a strong look, cool lore, and a heavy atmosphere that really worked, but combat was always the weak spot. It felt stiff at times and didn't have enough depth to fully carry the game. With Mortal Shell 2, the developers seem very aware of that. The early footage leans hard into variety, more shells, more weapons, more enemy types, and a much nastier overall vibe. The combat shown so far looks faster, bloodier, and more flexible, with less of that clunky feel the original struggled with. Everything takes place in a grim, hostile fantasy world that looks just as oppressive as before, if not more. One of the bigger promises here is that Mortal Shell 2 is going open world. That's always a risky move for this genre, but the level design and world layout in the first game were already one of its stronger points. If Cold Symmetry can expand that idea without losing focus, this could work really well. There's still a lot we don't know. No firm release date yet, just a 2026 window. But based on what's been shown, this feels like a sequel that's actually trying to fix the right things, instead of just doing more of the same. If you liked the mood of the first game but wanted better combat, this one's worth keeping an eye on. The Blood of Dawnwalker is a medieval fantasy RPG being made by Rebel Wolves, a studio formed by former The Witcher 3 developers. The game centers on Cohen, a character who's half human and half vampire, and the team is clearly trying to do something a little different with how the story works. The big hook here is time. There's a built-in time system where major story events will happen once enough time passes, whether you're ready or not. Quests don't just sit there waiting forever, and every action you take pushes the clock forward. What's interesting is that this isn't about failing the game outright. From what the developers have explained, missing objectives or taking too long doesn't end your run. Instead, it shifts how the story plays out and what kind of ending you get. Time works more like a resource you spend. Do you rush key goals, or do you slow down and explore, knowing that delay has a cost? That choice seems baked into everything. Cohen's split nature also feeds into how you approach the world. During the day, you can handle situations in more grounded ways, like talking things through or moving openly. At night, his vampire side opens up other paths. You can climb walls, sneak past guards, and lean into stealth and mobility to reach places that would otherwise be blocked. The gameplay they've shown suggests a lot of flexibility, with different solutions depending on how you want to play and when you decide to act. There's no exact release date yet, but The Blood of Dawnwalker is planned for 2026. If I had to guess, it feels like a second-half release, but we'll see how it shapes up as they show more. Fable is still one of the biggest question marks hanging over Xbox right now. It's being developed by Playground Games, the studio known for Forza Horizon, and it was first announced all the way back in 2020. Since then, actual gameplay has been pretty hard to come by. That silence only got louder when the game didn't show up at the Xbox Games Showcase during Gamescom 2025, which caught a lot of people off guard. Earlier this year, Fable was officially delayed to 2026, and at this point, most fans are just hoping that's the final delay. The lack of new footage has fueled plenty of rumors. Some people think the early trailers didn't land quite how Microsoft wanted, and now the team is holding back until everything feels locked in. Xbox Game Studios leadership has said the game will be worth the wait, clearly trying to ease concerns, but words only go so far when there's nothing new to look at. One interesting detail is the tech behind it. Fable is being built on the Forza Tech engine, which isn't what most people expect for a big fantasy RPG. That alone raises eyebrows, but Playground seems confident they can make it work, and that choice adds another layer of curiosity to the whole project. Right now, Fable feels like a game defined by anticipation and uncertainty. The name carries a lot of weight, and expectations are high. Whether it all comes together in 2026 is the big question, and until we see real gameplay, that mystery isn't going anywhere. Solasta 2 is the follow-up to Solasta Crown of the Magister, the tabletop-style CRPG that came out in 2021 and quietly built a loyal fanbase. It never blew up the way Baldur's Gate 3 did, but a lot of CRPG fans stuck with it because it nailed tactical combat, gave players tons of choices, and stayed very close to actual Dungeons & Dragons rules. That's the lane Solasta 2 is still in, but it's clearly aiming higher this time. One of the big upgrades is the move to Unreal Engine 5, and yeah, it shows. The game looks way cleaner and more detailed than the first one ever did on Unity. Lighting, environments, character models, it all feels like a step forward instead of a small tweak. Another huge change is the voice cast. Solasta 2 brings in Deborah Wild, Amelia Tyler, and Ben Starr, which is a serious upgrade in terms of performance and presentation. It's not suddenly trying to outdo Baldur's Gate 3, but it's definitely closing the gap in a way the original never could. If you're the type who loves deep turn-based combat, party builds, and careful planning, this is very much still your kind of game. And if you're someone who's already burned through Baldur's Gate 3 more times than you want to admit and hasn't touched the Divinity games yet, Solasta 2 is an easy recommendation to keep on your radar. Just remember, it's launching in early access on March 12th, not as a full release. You won't see the entire story yet, but there should be a sizable chunk of world and systems to mess with as development continues. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is a new tactical RPG coming to Nintendo Switch in 2026. It was shown during a Nintendo Direct on September 12th last year, and it marks the 18th main game in the Fire Emblem series. At its core, this is still very much Fire Emblem. Turn-based battles play out on grids, positioning matters, and every move feels deliberate. Alongside that, there are story-focused exploration sections that connect directly to what's happening in the plot, instead of feeling tacked on. A lot of people liked how tight and polished Fire Emblem Engage felt in combat, but plenty of fans also felt the story didn't hit as hard as Three Houses. From what we've seen so far, Fortune's Weave looks like it's trying to balance both sides better. The trailer gives off the sense that the team paid attention to that feedback and wants stronger characters and story moments without losing the sharp tactical side the series is known for. The structure looks familiar, but the cast and storyline are completely new, which should make it easier for new players to jump in, while still giving longtime fans something fresh to dig into. It's clearly built on what worked before, just with more focus on giving the story room to breathe. If you've been waiting for another Fire Emblem that feels confident in both its battles and its story, this one is shaping up to be worth watching when it lands sometime in 2026. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is a full remake of Dragon Quest VII, Fragments of the Forgotten Past, from Square Enix. This is actually the second time the game's been remade, following the 3DS version from 2013, with the original launching on PlayStation back in 2000. For players who don't know the history, Dragon Quest VII was also the first entry in the series to release outside Japan after Dragon Quest IV. This isn't just the old game running cleaner on new hardware. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is rebuilt with a new look inspired by miniature dioramas with detailed character models that still stick closely to the classic designs. A lot of the systems have been adjusted to feel smoother too. Random encounters are gone, so you can see enemies and avoid them while exploring.
Party members can use auto strategies, and combat moves faster, which helps a lot when dealing with weaker enemies. One of the bigger changes is how vocations work. Each character can use 2 vocations at once, opening up more ways to mix roles and skills. There are also brand new vocations planned for 2026, which gives returning players something new to mess with. That said, some areas from the original game have been cut to keep the story moving at a better pace. It's still a full game, just a tighter one. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined launches on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch 2, and Steam on February 5th of this year, and it's aimed at both longtime fans and players looking for a big, classic-style JRPG with modern touches.
Fatekeeper is an upcoming first-person action RPG made by Paraglacial and published by THQ Nordic. It's set in a fantasy world built around old myths, broken kingdoms, and the idea that fate itself has gone off the rails. The story follows a warrior known as the Fatekeeper, someone tied to fixing a world where ancient powers are waking back up and long-buried magic is starting to warp everything around it. Ruins are active again, old forces are pushing back into the open, and the whole place feels like it's slowly falling apart. The big focus here is combat and how much freedom it gives you. Fights aren't just about swinging a sword or tossing a spell. You can use the space around you in smart ways, knock enemies off cliffs, slam them into traps, or mix magic with weapon hits to get big, messy results. It's very hands-on and physical, and every fight lets you experiment a bit. Exploration is a huge part of it too. The world is packed with hidden rooms, relics, and objects that react to your powers, so poking around actually pays off. A lot of the combat style takes clear inspiration from Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, with that same mix of brutal melee and clever spell use. Visually, Fatekeeper leans into a grounded fantasy look. Think misty caves, ruined temples, and bright forests, all pushed by Unreal Engine lighting to give the world a heavy mood. The game is planned to hit early access in 2026, starting on PC. Showa American Story is a 2026 game from Netcom Games that's hard to compare to anything else. It's billed as a post-apocalyptic romance RPG mixed with alternate history and full-on period drama. And yeah, it's as strange as that sounds. The trailers don't hide it either. This thing is loud, weird, and very proud of it. The story centers on a girl who comes back from the dead in a ruined America filled with zombies, monsters, and a bunch of very colorful human survivors. The tone swings between emotional and completely unhinged, often in the same scene. The game openly leans into 80s pop culture with a heavy love for B-movie vibes and over-the-top style. It's flashy, dramatic, and clearly not trying to be subtle. Netcom Games describes it as a love letter to that era, and it shows in the music, visuals, and characters. Everything feels exaggerated on purpose. Right now, details on systems and mechanics are still pretty light, but based on what's been shown, this looks more about the ride than strict realism or tight rules. It was originally planned for late last year but got pushed back, and there's still no exact release date. What we do know is that Showa American Story is locked in for 2026, and if you're into strange ideas and campy settings that don't take themselves too seriously, this one is very hard to ignore. Bloodstained: The Scarlet Engagement is a new entry in the Bloodstained series and a follow-up to the events around Bloodstained: Ritual of the Night. Ritual of the Night came out in 2019, and a lot of people saw it as a modern take on classic Castlevania. Side-scrolling action, big focus on exploration, and a ton of wandering through castles and strange labs while fighting demons and other ugly things. That core idea is still very much the backbone here. The Scarlet Engagement goes further back in time with a prequel story set in 16th century England. The main threat this time is a demon lord named Elias, and the game centers around stopping his grip on the land. One of the big promises is scale. The map is supposed to be much larger, and the world changes as time moves forward. There's a full day and night cycle, and light and darkness shift as the hours pass, which affects how areas behave and how you move through them. Another major change is the buddy system. Instead of sticking to one character, you're controlling two at once. Leo and Alex each have their own abilities, and you can swap between them on the fly to solve fights or get through tricky spots. It sounds like the game is built around using both characters together instead of treating one like backup. There's still no exact release date, but Bloodstained: The Scarlet Engagement is currently planned to land sometime in 2026. If Ritual of the Night clicked with you, this feels like a more ambitious swing at that same style. Monster Hunter Stories 3: Twisted Reflection is the next turn-based RPG set in the Monster Hunter universe. Unlike the main series, this one isn't about chasing monsters down with oversized weapons. This story's games focus on being a rider, forming bonds with monsters like Rathalos and Tigrex, and building a team instead of hunting them for parts. In Twisted Reflection, the setup leans even harder into that idea. You're part of a group of rangers whose job is to protect endangered monsters and help fix damaged environments. Instead of slaying creatures, you're searching for eggs. Those eggs hatch into monster partners, and once you've helped restore an area, monsters can be released back into the wild to rebuild the ecosystem. That loop is the core of how the world opens up and how you grow stronger. Combat sticks with the turn-based JRPG style the series is known for. Battles are more about planning and understanding monster behavior than raw reflexes. The tone is also very different from mainline Monster Hunter. It's lighter, more colorful, and focused on your relationship with the creatures rather than constant combat pressure. If Monster Hunter Wilds didn't fully land for you, or if you've just been spending your time back in Monster Hunter World, this is a very different lane for the series. Monster Hunter Stories 3: Twisted Reflection is scheduled to release on March 13th this year, and it's a solid pick if you want something familiar but calmer inside the Monster Hunter world. Code Vein 2 is the next entry in Bandai Namco's anime-style Souls-like series, and it's landing very soon. This one's out first on the calendar, with a full release on January 30th, and depending on the edition, you can get in early starting January 27th. That alone makes it an easy one to keep an eye on. The bigger deal, though, is that Code Vein 2 keeps doing that rare combo of anime style with combat that actually holds up. A lot of anime games look cool but fall apart once the fighting starts. This series doesn't have that problem. Combat still has that tight Souls-like feel, but with faster movement and more flexibility. The blood code system is the big hook again, and it's still one of the coolest class systems out there. You're not locked into one role. You can swap builds on the fly, change how you fight, and adjust to different enemies without restarting your character. It makes experimenting feel natural instead of risky. They've also made tweaks to the blood code system compared to the first game. Some of those changes look promising, some raise questions, and it's one of those things we'll really need hands-on time with to see how it shakes out. But the core idea is still there, and it's still strong. If you like tough combat, stylish characters, and systems that let you play your way, Code Vein 2 is shaping up to be a solid start to the year. Diablo 4: Lord of Hatred is the second expansion for Diablo 4, and it pushes the story forward in a big way. This expansion finally brings players face-to-face with Mephisto, the Lord of Hatred himself, one of the prime evils that's been looming over the game since launch. Story-wise, this is a major moment for the series, not just a side chapter. The expansion adds a brand new region called the Ancient Land of Skosglen, giving players a fresh area to explore, fight through, and loot. Along with that, the Paladin class is making a return. That alone is going to make a lot of longtime Diablo fans very happy. If you've pre-ordered the expansion, you can already access the Paladin, and Blizzard has also confirmed there's another class coming that hasn't been revealed yet. On the systems side, Lord of Hatred is also aiming to smooth out and improve the endgame. More variety, better pacing, and changes meant to keep high-level play interesting for longer. That's been one of the big talking points around Diablo 4, so seeing it addressed here is a good sign. Diablo 4: Lord of Hatred launches on April 28, 2026, and for anyone still invested in Diablo, it's shaping up to be a pretty important update.
is no longer coming. Hell is already here.
Control Resonant is the follow-up to award-winning Control, revealed at the Game Awards 2025 and set to launch in 2026 on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. The story takes place 7 years after the first game, and this time the focus moves away from Jessie Faden and over to her younger brother, Dylan. He wakes up from a long coma and quickly finds out the hiss problem never really went away, it just spread. Instead of being locked inside the oldest house, the mess has leaked out into Manhattan. The city itself is warped, broken, and full of that familiar, unsettling Control weirdness. Buildings twist, space doesn't behave right, and danger comes from every angle. Dylan is a very different lead than Jessie. His powers are unstable, his head isn't exactly in one piece, and that makes everything feel more tense and less predictable. Remedy is clearly using this as a chance to stretch the series out. New places, new systems, and more layers to the story are all on the table. Annapurna is co-funding the project, and there are plans tied to film and TV down the line, so this isn't a small step forward. Control Resonant looks like a darker, riskier continuation that wants to push the series somewhere new, while still keeping that strange, uneasy feel intact. The Expanse Osiris Reborn is a story-focused sci-fi action RPG clearly inspired by games like Mass Effect. You play as a Pinkwater security mercenary whose short break on the asteroid Eros goes bad fast and pulls them into a much bigger conspiracy. You'll create and customize your own captain, then build and lead a crew of specialists as things spiral outward. Big sci-fi RPGs like this aren't super common anymore, so this one already stands out. The team behind it is Owlcat Games, the studio that made the Pathfinder games and Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. They know how to handle deep RPG systems and long, choice-driven stories, so expectations are pretty high. From what's been shown so far, combat looks like a third-person, cover-based shooter, very much in the Mass Effect lane. The Expanse universe isn't packed with wild alien species, but it makes up for that with grounded space politics, tension, and human conflict. There's still a lot we haven't seen yet, including a firm release date, but the game is currently expected to launch sometime this year. For fans of sci-fi RPGs, this one is absolutely worth keeping an eye on.
What the hell happened here? Hey, buddy.
Clockwork Revolution showed up again at the Xbox Game Showcase 2025 with a new gameplay trailer and a clear 2026 release window, plus a Day 1 Game Pass launch. This is the first real look we've had in about 2 years, and yeah, at a glance it might remind you of BioShock Infinite. They're leaning into what makes their game different. The big hook here is something they call visual reactivity. You carry a device called the chronometer that lets you jump into the past, mess with a key moment, then jump back to the present and actually see the city change because of it. Entire districts can look totally different, and those changes stick. The trailer even showed a choice that leads to a character dying for good. That's not just flavor, this is a full RPG. You've got deep character creation, and your stats don't just affect combat, they change how NPCs talk to you and how situations play out. The character creator itself is apparently the most expensive single asset the studio has ever built, which tells you how much weight they're putting on role-playing. There's also a running storyline about sentient automatons and their place in this world, which adds a moral angle that keeps popping up as you play. And tone-wise, the devs have been clear they want this to be funnier than BioShock Infinite, with a drier, sharper sense of humor that lines up more with their past games. Clockwork Revolution really wants every choice to leave a mark you can actually notice, not just read about later. Nioh 3 is the next main entry from Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja, and it builds directly on what made Nioh and Nioh 2 stand out in the first place. Those earlier games weren't perfect, but the combat was on another level, and honestly, it still sits at the top of the whole Souls-like space, even if Nioh kind of feels like its own thing at this point. So yeah, hearing that Team Ninja was going back to this series was exciting, especially when they surprise dropped a demo during the State of Play last June. If you've been following Team Ninja, you can really see how they've been tightening things up over time. Nioh, Nioh 2, Wolong Fallen Dynasty, Rise of the Ronin, each game tried new ideas even when everything didn't fully land. Nioh 2 is still the high point for a lot of people, but those later games clearly taught the team some useful lessons. Nioh 3 feels like them pulling all of that together. The biggest shift here is structure. Nioh 3 moves away from the old mission-based setup and goes with a full open world instead. You're riding around, clearing enemy camps, fighting bosses, and tackling objectives in a way that's closer to Rise of the Ronin than classic Nioh. It's a big change, and it already makes the game feel different. The other huge change is the samurai and shinobi system. Instead of just swapping stances or weapons, you switch between two full combat modes. Samurai mode is heavier, slower, and more defensive. Shinobi mode is fast, light, and built around movement. Each has its own gear and weapons, and you can swap between them instantly, which makes fights feel way more flexible. The full game launches February 5th, 2026 on PlayStation 5 and PC.
So those are the most anticipated RPGs of 2026. Which games are you most excited for? Did we miss any that you think should be here? I want to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let's talk about it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us out. And if you want more gaming content like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.